Welcome to the Ready, Aim, Fire podcast.
How did that role come about? What was the story behind you becoming Geralt of Rivia?
It was back in 2004. I was called in for an audition for another game. I was working primarily in games at the time. And I was called in for an audition for this thing called The Witcher. And I was auditioning for the role of Geralt of Rivia. And I knew nothing about any of this because the books hadn't come out in English yet. And aside from a Polish TV series that I knew nothing about.
Is that the Hexa?
The Hexa, yeah. Which is not great. It mostly because the technology at the time wasn't really good enough to really do, they couldn't do a lot.
I think you'd say it's charming.
It's charming.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to say it. And some of the performances are really great and everything. But anyways, I knew nothing about that. So I went in for this audition and, the way auditions for games work typically is you go in and you're in the booth for 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes if you're lucky. And they just keep telling you to try different things. Mm-hmm. They record it all and then they decide later. That's all changed now. Now it's all, mostly self-tapes from home since COVID. I went in, I did the audition, and during the audition they kept saying, Doug, can you get your voice lower. And he's emotionless, no emotion. I kept trying, and finally somebody said, think about Clint Eastwood in the Dirty Harry films. And that was kind of the inspiration for it. You can kind of hear it. It's in there. Go ahead, punk. Make my day.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's how it started. And then I got cast. The rest is kind of history. But I almost wasn't Geralt. No. Between Witcher 1 and Witcher 2, CD Projekt Red decided to change things up. And they built a new engine called the Red Engine to run their games. And they just rethought the whole thing. And part of that rethinking was possible recasting as well. And so most of the characters were recast. Most of the characters that were returning to the series, including Geralt. And I found out about this through a friend who went to an audition for Geralt and called me up afterwards and said, hey, Doug, I just auditioned for this character called Geralt of Rivia. I thought that was you. I said, it was me. I messaged Boris at CD Projekt Red and said, hey, I hear you're auditioning for Geralt. I'd love to throw my hat in the ring again. I was very positive about it, despite the actor in me going, oh my God, I did some horrible work or something. I've pissed somebody off. I've done something. It's all my fault. And eventually I was recast. Actors are riddled with doubt and, fear and all kinds of things. And, big part of the job is actually to overcome that and do the job. But I went in for the first recording, and I think it was the first recording session for Witcher 2, and Kate Saxon, the director, she told me what happened. She basically said, how this all came about, right? And she told me the story, basically they were rethinking everything. They changed vocal production studios and everything. So it's kind of one of those things where I tell this story most often when I'm talking to students or young actors early in their careers, because what I did is not what most actors would do. Most actors would roll over and go, oh, I must have done a bad job, or they didn't like me, or something, they put it on themselves. And I just kind of went, I don't know what's going on, but I enjoyed that, and I'd like to do it again. So contacting them with a positive outward face was a courageous thing to do, but also it paid off in the end, because here I am talking to you about Witcher 2 and 3 and
Beyond.
Obviously, you've met a lot of fans over the years. What would you say is your strangest or funniest fan interaction?
One of the things that sticks out most, I don't know if it's funniest or strangest, but it's one of those things that's implanted in my brain. I went to EGX. EGX is like a gaming industry show here in the UK. I went to EGX just as a punter. I wasn't like a guest or anything like that. I was just showing up to check out new games and stuff. But I always tweet that I'm going, and then people come and find me and, want to say hi and stuff. And this guy came up to me and he introduced himself, and he said, I love your work. I want to ask you a favor. And I was like, okay, yeah. Can I get your autograph? And I was like, yeah, of course you can get my autograph. And then he took off his shirt.
Oh.
And presented his shoulder to me and gave me a Sharpie.
No.
He said, will you sign my shoulder? And I said, please tell me you're not going to get a tattoo. And he said, yeah, I'm going to get a tattoo. And so I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? Because I don't know how well I can write on skin. And, I don't know how pretty my signature is and blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff. And he said, yeah, it doesn't matter. You could mess it up. Do whatever you like. Draw a picture if you want.
Did he already have any other tattoos?
Yeah, he had other tattoos.
Fine.
Yeah, it wasn't like his first tattoo. But so I was like, okay. So I signed his arm or his shoulder, somewhere back here. And he said, right, I'm going right now. I'm going to go get a tattoo. And he texted me later that day with a picture of his brand new tattoo. And he had a Geralt's face and my signature right underneath it. I was like, wow.
I mean, that's dedication.
I was going to say, and testament to people loving your work. My God.
Yeah, it was, never have I done anything like that before or since, I don't think.